Hello and welcome to the third installment of Code Cleanup. Today we're going to talk about something that makes reading your code much faster. So far we want to talk about stuff that makes it easier. Today we're going to talk about formatting your code and how you can do it. Here are 3 tips to help you do this. So first tip, make your code look professional. This is something that I see way too often, and people just don't look at their code and see that they are just doing a bad job at just keeping proper spacing and everything. So let's take a look at this example. This is what I'm talking about. So here are some issues with the code. For example, there are way too many missed spaces. Like after the comma, there should be, for example, a space, just to be more, just to be easier to read, right? Here, for example, is just plain ugly to see this, and I usually put spaces before and after an operator. Now this might be something that you don't have to do, but I think from my experience it really helps. But after a semicolon and a comma, you should always put space because it really helps legibility. Alright, so this is what we're gonna do, and after the decrement operator here, of course, and don't leave too much space here. For example, there's no need to have this much space. I see this way too often. There's absolutely no need here. Indent properly here, for example. These two are not indented properly. What else? Again, spaces between operators, and when you're actually formatting the string, well, there's no problem if you don't use string.format or some formatting function in your library. The problem is when you don't actually concatenate them properly. So here you can see that grade 4 std.getName doesn't get appended with a space behind it. So 4 and the student's name is going to be all in just one single word. So don't forget about these, and again, spaces before and after operator is not necessarily something that you should worry about. Alright, but spaces like empty lines here, they should have some sort of meaning here. So maybe before the return statement you can add an empty line. That's what I usually do. But here, for example, inside the for loop, there's no need for that. It just kind of makes your code look weird. Maybe here, for example, that would be no problem if you add that. So now take a look at this code. It looks much more professional, right? Like somebody actually cared about it and cared about you looking at something that's not ugly, right? So something to keep in mind. All right, the next tip is give your formatting meaning and standardize it. And what do I mean by that? So sure, you're formatting your code, but how? Like in what way? Why are you formatting this way instead of the other way? Sure, there are, like, you can look online and search for formatting standards, but it might not fit for your needs, and the team, it's normal that the team might not see it as a good coding standard, right? So what you should do is actually look at your code and format it in a way that makes sense for your use cases, and everybody in your team can understand it. It doesn't have to be some sort of standard way from the internet, but standards at least at the level of your project. So here's what I mean. In JavaScript, for example, we have promises, right? Promises for a GET request. For example, here I have a GET request, and you can call then, which signifies that you want to execute something after you got the response from the server for that GET request. And here I'm just console logging something else, and then if it fails, I'm also console logging failed something. But as you can see here, the indentation is key. What I'm doing here is keeping everything here on the same line, but when there's a function, I indent it once related to the get statement, right? So that you know that, oh, here is something that executes asynchronous. So you realize that, oh, it's simple. This is a then and this is a fail, right? It's pretty simple to find out what's up here. Same thing with this second request. Here's a post, and I'm using the same then and fail. But here I'm also posting a configurable object, really, where I pass in URL, content type, and the data as stringified. There's something. Sometimes you have to do this with Ajax, but besides the point, when you actually post something here, at the top of it, you can take a look and see that, oh, this is the actual object that signifies what's posting to the server, right? So you can take a look at it and see, oh, all right, so we're posting to this link this data, right? You cannot really mismatch this with a function call, all right? So that's the key thing here. At the beginning, you can have an object, and then you have then and fail. Same thing down here. For example, if you want to push for some reason into some array another promise that resolves when these two resolve, then you can do this, and then I also call a then function for both of them. It's fairly straightforward. You might, in this case, for example, if you're pushing and also winning two of them, you might want to do something of the sorts, something like that maybe, and then you could, if you feel like you really need to know that you're pushing inside an array of promises. All right, and another example I want to exemplify here because it's quite important. This is something I learned from a friend of mine at work. In C#, when you're building strings for SQL querying, it's kind of interesting that what you can do is build them as if you're actually going to read them from an SQL reader. Like in this example, we have some columns. As you can see, it just has some columns from an S table, name, age, username. They are all aligned at the as keyword, and they have an alias. All right, and then you have the query right here, and it starts with an empty line, and then the next line starts with select, and indented is the query columns, and now you know that, oh, so we're selecting all these columns. It makes sense, right? It's kind of intuitive to read this. And then we're concatenating that with a from, and you notice that it's on the same indentation level as the select, and you are quite used to reading these statements. And then you go, okay, well, that's dbo.student table. I think I forgot an S here, excuse me. But yeah, you would know that, oh, this is the table that you want to select from. And then you have a where here that you might want to actually align at the equal sign, or might not, depends. And the end keyword is at the beginning here, because what you can do sometimes is actually copying this. If you have a lot of conditions in the where statement, you can just copy this without getting errors in your code, because at the beginning you might always need to select something, but at the end you want to select a something different, but it's much more explicit. Okay, so that's what I mean by actually giving meaning to formatting. It doesn't have to be something from the internet, it doesn't have to be from anywhere. If you think that it really helps you understand the code, if you can just look at the code and understand a bit out of it just from the way it's indented and the way it's a bit formatting here, you might be able to. then that's all right. Use it and also standardize it. Don't just use it once and be like, ah, I'm gonna make another standard. Use it throughout the whole project. Okay, and the third tip here is a very simple one actually, is group elements together. And by that actually group similar elements together, right? So basically here's, let's say, a function that initializes or does some sort of action. I don't really care, but it looks like a mess, right? It's like you are instantiating this variable, this is an array, a false, a true, then you are getting the entity, filtering, then somehow you're getting a waypoint which goes to a post, and now we're back to actually instantiating stuff. It's really messy. So let's try and group them together and see how we can actually improve this to better readability. So I'm gonna just copy this and paste it down here, and let's take a look here. So for example, all the arrays we can actually bring up, right? That would be an easy fix. Like you would notice that, oh, okay, well, this is an array, simple enough. Next up, we have a lot of booleans which can be grouped together. Right, so it has enable, that's a has, I guess. Has shouldn't be like in between enables. It kind of makes sense to be like for these two to be grouped together. And then we have an entity, which is some sort of a call. Then you have an entity filtered, which filters that obj.entity. You might actually just merge these two lines together. It's very straightforward, but if you're using this entity somewhere else, it might be useful here. What else here? Student aliases, as you can see here, you might also notice that this one is actually duplicated. So if you start grouping things together, you might realize what is duplicated and what is not, due to how they are grouped either by type or by significance or by prefix even. Doesn't really matter what you group them by, but if you do group them by, it really helps legibility. If you go like, okay, well, this is the same as this, so we can actually just remove this because we're double assigning the same variable. All right, and then there's a permission, which is another function call, which we can add in here, and just an enter maybe, and all of a sudden the code looks a little bit cleaner, as you can see from here. So from starting from this and going to this, it kind of looks more legible. Like you can see that, oh, here we have some arrays, and then we have some booleans that you initialize, and then you get some, you call some functions that you might have to search for, sure, but at least you know that all the calls are here, and then you do some work in here. I mean, sure, this waypoint might be up here, like you might want to add this waypoint up here, but depends. If this waypoint, for example, since I actually added it in the post call, if it's being used only in this post call, then it's a nice addition to just couple it together with this thing. And also inside this function, you might want to actually indent it as we did before. I usually don't indent the find and filter function, but some guys really like doing that, and it might be more clean that way. Okay, and that's about it. Thank you for watching, and I hope you got something out of it. I hope you understand why formatting your code is important. It's not going to take you too long to format your code. At most, like 5 minutes to do 100 lines of code, to actually just do at least the first step of just putting spaces properly and just removing empty lines and whatnot. Just that. It's not gonna take you too long. Giving formatting meaning might, that's a bit questionable, but that's also doable, and if you do it properly, it's going to really help you understand the code and improve debugging, implementing time, and designing time, everything. And of course, grouping things together again, how much did it take? Like what? a minute, two, maybe. Okay, so I hope you got something out of it, and let me know in the comments below if you have any questions, and see you next time. Thank you for watching.